It's springtime! And did you know that springtime is the #1 time for people to get massively depressed? That's right, it's not winter, it's actually spring. And I can attest to this. In any case, I decided to celebrate this great, beautiful time of the calendar by doing a Q&A video, and I encourage you to post the questions you have for me in the comments down below underneath this video, and I'm going to try to answer as many as I can of them in this video. If I don't get to your question, I'm very sorry, but as you can see down here, the video is only so long, so I won't be able to answer all of the questions. Let's see, the first question we have here is from Buffalo Guy 1991, and he wants to know, what was your favorite conspiracy theory of the last few years? I have to say, I don't really keep up with the whole conspiracy theory thing that much anymore. Haven't for like many years. But I do have to say I was quite partial to the whole everything that's like sort of big and vaguely resembles any sort of human shape or animal shape is actually a prehistoric giant. But really my absolute favorite these past few years was actually one that I found rather recently called the Secret Space Program, which was and it's basically a bunch of people who think that they were like aliens but also humans, and they were trained by like the CIA on Mars as super soldiers to... It's very complicated, it's very weird, it's very fucked up. I highly recommend the video that I watched to get myself into this by Oki's Weird Stories, one of my favorite channels on YouTube. He basically infiltrated them. It's very funny. Saucer with 2 R's over here would like to know, which do you think makes someone cooler, smoking cigarettes or smoking crack? You know, I've given this a lot of thought actually recently for obvious reasons, and I think I've come to the conclusion that the coolest thing to do is neither of these options, but to actually be smoking a big stick of dynamite like they do, like the bad guys do in those old like French cowboy comics. I mean, just imagine how badass it would be if you're like a rich railway baron to, instead of being drawn with like a cigar, instead have a stick of dynamite in your mouth. And I think that aesthetic really translates very well, especially if you're like a modern equivalent of that whole case. So if you're maybe like you're an investment banker, you know, you run a hedge fund, or if you're some sort of landlord or property developer, I really highly encourage you to try this out. You know, use your considerable funds to get your hands on a stick of dynamite, put it in your mouth, and there's like a little cord that you can like very conveniently, it's not like cigars where you have to put it right up to the thing. This will very conveniently burn down. You just have to hold it in your mouth, wait a little bit. It's gonna be so cool when it finally, like, you can start smoking it. As an author, how do you feel about Barnes and Noble, the bookstore chain? Asks Friestvolker with a V. I have to be honest, I don't really understand the question on this one. Like, I don't... It's like a bookstore. Unless there was like I assume there was some sort of scandal that I have no idea happened. I'm pretty sure, actually, this one is my H.P. Lovecraft book, which a lot of people are very jealous of, by the way, was purchased at a Barnes & Noble's in London. But I'm not really sure, like, it's a book... Of course, I'd prefer if it wasn't like a big chain bookstore. Prefer to buy my books at like a small mom-and-pop shop. But even that is difficult because I, you know, live in Germany and I try to get my hands on English books. Sometimes I have to order off the Amazon. Someone with a really long Chinese name asks, when will your next meetup be, and am I allowed to come after what happened last time? Funny you should ask. There's actually a meetup that I have announced very recently happening in Hamburg, Germany on the 21st of May of this year. I'm going to link the announcement video to that. As to the second half of your question, if I recall correctly, and I am like placing you as the right person that I think you basically had a bunch of empty acid reflux medicine bottles taped to your clown costume and said that I am the funny Wilhelm Tell as you shot apple-studded arrows at the waitstaff with a recurve bow. So yes, absolutely. That was the most fun part of the last meetup. Hayden Schroeter has a bit of a long question. She would like to know, why have I found photographic evidence of you leaving Hong Kong in July 19 1997, East Berlin in November 1989, Catalonia in June 1937, Moscow in November 1917, and Dresden in May 1849. Well, Hayden, that may be because you have been following me on my Instagram account at JReg, which I have been maintaining for about 200 years, so that timeline checks out completely. Thank you for being such a long-time superfan, though. I really appreciate it. The next question here is, looking back at some of your older videos, are there any you now disagree with or wish you did differently? If so, what? By Florida Man Cody _E. Is that _ or is it _? See, the problem is I barely remember what video I made like last week. There have been situations, especially on my Discord server, where people have posted videos of mine that I completely forgot that I made. So I assume 100% there must be videos where I've made points and statements that I wouldn't agree with. Now, I do know for certain that there have been a few videos where I didn't get my point across in the way that I would have liked. But even if I did know specific examples of those kinds of videos that I now disagree with, I wouldn't, like, go out of my way to delete them outside, or like correct them even, outside of maybe like making contradictory statements to those things in newer videos, but not like in reference to those old videos, because that way I'd have to remember everything I've ever said, and you know, I am a human being. But mainly it's that I have always had, like, made a habit out of saying only things that I believe to be true. And I know for a fact that I've pretty much always done this, even before I was an adult. And what I do believe to be true has certainly changed over the years, but that doesn't change the fact that at that time I believed that to be true, and at this time I believe different things to be true. So my thought process regarding this is like, if I thought what I was saying is true back then, and now I think that what I'm saying is true now, but they're contradictory statements, how do I know that at either of these times either of these things were actually true? Like, they might both be wrong. I might be wrong now and have been right back then. I don't know that for certain. Not to mention, and this, like, we're really departing far away from the original question, I don't see really my videos as a didactic thing. I'm not trying to teach anyone anything. I'm just trying to provide ideas, occasionally some information, but mostly ideas. And I think that people will take away what they will take away from any given video, and what that is really depends on what kind of person they are and what beliefs they already hold. I don't really have much control over that, nor would I want to be able to control that. I think people are by and large capable of thinking for themselves. So yeah, I kinda, like, I'm just a guy on the internet having opinions. No one should take my word, or anyone else's word, frankly, for just gospel. I really probably did not answer the question properly. Sator asks, when did you realize it was your calling to destroy Skynet and save the human race? Well, funny you should ask, because all this really dates back to when I was working at a Spanish language school in Riga, Latvia, basically as like the guy who does the technical stuff, like a radio broadcast operator for a local student radio from that school. Now, this was back in a day where, like, having racist opinions was a bit more acceptable in the common discourse, but not entirely acceptable. This particular incident happened around I think a representative of the Jatiya party, which is like a conservative nationalist thing in Bangladesh, a powerful political force there, actually. And they were holding a talk on the consequences of colonialism on South Asia and its people. And this talk, as well as the following debate, was being broadcast on our student radio station. And actually the person asking questions, this is in like the debate section now of the whole thing, the guy asking the question was the brother of the broadcast director, so basically my boss. You know, not so much strictly a boss, but he was like the elected leader of the student body that ran the whole thing. And actually, the guy asking the question was a pentathlete, interestingly enough, which is like a thing where I think it's like fencing, then swimming, then horse jumping, and then running. I might have missed. No, there's shooting somewhere in between all of those. And I don't really remember the exact wording of the question, and it probably wouldn't translate very well because it was like in this half Spanish, half English, half Latvian, maybe a little bit of, I don't know what language they speak in Bangladesh, mixed in. But essentially, it was about how the relations were between like post-colonial countries that are inhabited mostly by non-white people versus those who were inhabited mostly by white people. And the implication, the suggestion that was sort of sprinkled in there was like, it was a bit of a loaded question, because he sort of implied that the reason the countries that have mostly white people, post-colonial countries that have mostly white people in them, were doing better economically in terms of their social systems, in terms of just the general standard of living, the wealth that people had access to, the quality of the infrastructure, all that stuff, was due to the fact that they were white. There was like some sort of ethnic reason, which, you know, is obviously kind of racist if you think about it. Anyway, we were broadcasting this. We were actually broadcasting this on a very new IBM computer system, like one of the first digital computer systems designed specifically for like commercial broadcasting. It was a very big investment that the school had made for the fact that the like local radio station wasn't even all that popular. We had a handful of listeners at any given time, but it was a very high-tech, very valuable machine that we had. And so basically this girl comes in, who is the right-hand person for the broadcast director, whose brother, the pentathlete, was at this point asking the racially loaded question. And I remember at this point, she already was very invested in becoming like a nuclear physicist after school. She was studying very hard, and like this whole thing partly was part of like, she was implementing a lot of science broadcasting, and actually she did manage to become a nuclear physicist and make some major contribution that I personally don't really understand to the field of nuclear fusion. And so she was suggesting that we intervene, maybe cut the broadcast short a little bit, but the director, the program director, was like, oh, well, but actually this is like, we're not supposed to be editorializing this debate, this conversation. This is what journalism is about. And besides, if the conversation was running out of hand, the moderator would be the one in the position to have to like reel it back in. But the contention to this was, of course, that this wasn't really leading anywhere. This was just becoming a propaganda platform. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I do certainly agree with the point that probably the program director was influenced by the fact that it was his brother, the pentathlete, asking this particular question. And also, this was back in the day when you could be a little bit racist, but you couldn't be like so openly racist. People would look at you weird. And so there were rumors that this guy also held these kinds of same beliefs as their brother, probably because of the way that they were raised in their household. More importantly, though, and this, we didn't know this because it was the radio, like we couldn't actually see what was going on the stage. The moderator, who was supposed to reel this discussion back in, had actually stepped out to take a phone call because his infant daughter was in like some sort of train station in rural Latvia. She was lost, and it was like a family emergency that he had to take care of at that time. And he assumed that it would be like a very short thing that was going to happen, but it turned into a whole situation. That's why the whole debate really completely went out of hand. Anyway, that point my shift ended. I went home. I have no idea how any of that played out, but there was a homeless guy on my way home who said, it's your destiny to destroy Skynet and save the human race. I said, yeah, that sounds about right. Jane the Bane would like to know, what is your biggest source of inspiration when writing stories? I'm not really sure. I definitely couldn't identify a single definitive source of like the most inspiration. Inspiration strikes me at the weirdest times, and often even like it's not even inspiration that makes me write most of the time. If you wait for inspiration as a writer, waiting for inspiration is something you can do if you're a poet. But if you're a writer, you actually need to get some work done. Usually, I think for me, it's like most frequently, if I had to guess, it's a mood evoked by like a song or a picture that I see that then makes me come up with this same kind of mood in a story that emerges from it. Usually in short story format. A way to get some inspiration on the spot, by the way, just to like unlodge your brain and get the gears turning some more, is what I like to call the Modern E Ching, also known as the random article button on Wikipedia. So if you're stuck in any given place, you need a sort of new element, you need to just like get your brain out of the current headspace, send it on a completely new random train of thought, just hit that random article button. You might have to hit it multiple times until you find something that really gets your idea juices flowing into some vaguely associated concept with what you see on the page. Is our true Lord and Savior or not, after all, Matoro? Oh, Matori, yeah, we never got an answer, asks Sandro Serrano. Look, man, I have to say I can't really answer this question. Frankly, I struggle to admit that I have even some sort of opinion on it. The whole issue is just so mired in violent sectarianism that, like, even implying that I have some sort of public stance on it, I would fear for my life if I had to say that kind of thing. Now, I know some of you might say, oh, like, not having a stance explicitly is also kind of taking a stance, but frankly, I think that's, like, the least risky option for me to take. Lord Crafty asks, how goes the progress publishing your novel? And what got you into writing to begin with? Well, funny you should ask, because it's not going great. The process of querying agents, if you're not an industry insider, and apparently even if you're an industry insider, is absolutely horrific, because there's no universal guidelines. Every single individual agent has their own little particular things that need to be precisely right, and if it's not exactly like that, the email will just get yeeted unread. And I have it on pretty good authority that like 99% of literary agents don't even consider properly reading anything that they are sent if they don't recognize the person sending it from like some sort of con where they said, hey, you please go ahead and query me, send me an email. Which, you know, it's a bit difficult to reach English language speculative fiction conventions as an, you know, impoverished writer living in northern Germany. Not to mention, I'm kind of shit in like on-the-spot networking, because you have to be fake in order to do that, and I just can't be fake. I hope the person who told me all this was just being very cynical, but I've heard stuff like this from like more than one person who's in the industry, so I reckon maybe not. And of course, we're dealing with a very particular situation because I once again, as I so often do, got massively unlucky because right now there is a huge amount of manuscript submissions to editors and agents because of the pandemic, because people just, you know, found the time to write their books, which I specifically didn't. And also, a lot of agents specifically have been leaving the industry because of labor conditions. I found this out very late in the editing process of the book, like I was like a month from finishing it all up. And then somebody was like, oh yeah, by the way, nobody buys anything Western-like sci-fi Westerns, even though they're very popular with audiences, no one buys them. And everyone I've asked has like agreed with this. Like, yep, that doesn't happen, but they just don't do it. I don't understand why this is the case. None of them could properly explain to me why this was the case, because I don't think they know. But given that my novel is a sci-fi riverboat Western, you know. But I have been getting a lot of personalized projections, which, from what I understand, is very good. But to, you know, answer the nicer part of the question, really, when I was a kid, I was always the kid that everyone else would, like, ask to come up with the world that we would play in when we were playing make-believe. Sometimes even their characters, which I was always a bit uncomfortable with, because I always found it interesting when like other people made their own characters, I could integrate them into the world better, unless they like stood out or something, in which case, oh, this doesn't fit with the energy of the aesthetic is wrong. I didn't do that very much as a kid even. But yeah, I really loved storytelling, world building, always was a huge fan of it even before I got into writing, or reading for that matter. The thing is, I always had these like massive grand ideas, very specific in the way that I wanted them, and I always saw like movies and thought, well, this isn't particularly impressive. This needs to be way better than that. So I figure maybe it's not possible to do that. Until somebody was like, hey, you know, you can just like write, right? You can write all of that in prose, like novels. And it turns out it's true. I can pretty much like on my own sit down, put some words on the page, print some inks on the paper, and then I can paint on the canvas of the reader's imagination, and I don't need any huge budget for it. That's why I've known for certain that I want to be a writer since I was 11 years old. Oh, and it looks like the person with the really long Chinese username has edited their comment just now, and now it also says, also my name isn't Chinese, it's Japanese. And look, I am not trying to like sound racist, but like Japanese and Chinese letters, they all kind of look the same to me. The _better_ version underscore of me, no wait, there's another underscore between the off and the me, asks, does the major depressive disorder cause you to be depressed just because the brain chemistry says so, or do you get depressed because of the circumstances of your life? Well, I'd like to preface this answer by saying I'm not a medical doctor, so you shouldn't, you should ask a medical doctor about this. But as I understand it, because I have major depressive disorder, yes, that is how it works. The whole happy chemical factory in your... I don't know if it's just in your brain. You might have hormonal glands for that stuff in other parts of your body. Let's just say it's in the brain. It's broken, and it can burn out at any time, but also, it's normal to get sad or to even get depressed for a certain period of time when you have traumatic life events. That happens to everyone. And these things that happen to everyone can trigger a prolonged, more intense depressive episode as the machinery breaks down, not just from burning out regularly, which it will sometimes just do for literally no reason, but this kind of thing can make it worse. And sometimes, you have this feeling oh, the machinery is gonna burn out soon. I hope nothing bad happens, because the thing, when then a bad thing happens, that's gonna trigger the depressive episode. But it's difficult to compare all of these things, to even say that it's worse in terms of sadness than non-depressed people. How you can't really measure that shit. But it does tend to be prolonged, very long time type of deal. The next question is from Cthulhu, cool name by the way, and he wants to know, do you have any advice for someone who is seeking to write fiction as a career? Well, Luke, I assume you posted this comment before I answered the other question about writing, but I'm not a successful, traditionally published writer. I've self-published my short story collection, which obviously sold way better than I expected, but I didn't expect it to sell at all. But even if I was a successful New York Times best-selling author, you shouldn't just take simple advice from me without a massive grain of salt, because in any, especially highly competitive field, there's a huge amount of survivorship bias among the people at the top who made it. Because of course, as within any field, the people on top are going to think that the system is fair and that the reason they're on top is exclusively their merit in their hard work instead of any amount of good luck. You never really hear from the people who didn't make it in the given system and what their experiences are, so there's really no universal advice that anyone could give. The thing that I've always tried to do, mostly as self-motivation out of me wanting to do it, and also because I'm a bit of an idealist and I think that I hope that this is the thing that matters the most, is to always be improving the craft. Always try to become more skilled at the craft of writing. And there's plenty of online resources, even for free. There's a whole, Brandon Sanderson has a great lecture series that I do not tire of recommending. Also, if you can, bear horrible audio problems, he has a very long-standing podcast with two other guys and also Mary Rebennet Kowal. I don't remember the names of the other two guys because I've never read any of their work, but they're very good. Read good books and steal a lot of good technique. Don't steal, don't plagiarize. But you're supposed to steal good technique, and don't let the lawyers tell you otherwise. And a very important thing if you're gonna go online or anywhere to learn how to write better, don't, if anyone tells you you have to do something, you don't. That's not true. That's just their opinion. You're gonna find someone else who says the exact opposite of that. But even if everyone says you have to do things a certain particular way, writing is an art form, and even experts can be wrong about the things that they are experts on sometimes. Just the amount of bullshit rules that were barely even guidelines I have had to sift through in my process of becoming a better writer, I cannot count that high. To be fair, I cannot count very high, but it's a big number. Joy Jana would like to know, what is the last thing you did you were proud of? Well, this has got to be the most difficult question I've ever received. partially because I barely remember what I did yesterday. Luckily, to avoid this horrible feeling that life is passing me by and I cannot have meaningful memories of anything that happens because my mind is like a sieve with oiled up spaghetti in it, I've started to write down things that I do and that I found were not a waste of time. I just looked at the list and it says that I recently ran a good game session as a GM that was a lot of fun. So that. Here is a question from Always Mad, very relatable. Are there any new, lesser-known sci-fi/fantasy settings that you think are worth looking out for? I don't know if this is, not mainstream or lesser-known because I'm so far out of the discourse and, the scene of any of my hobbies. I'm a completely insular person because I don't really care about the opinions of other people. But a book that I really enjoyed, and it is certainly recent, is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I genuinely, completely honestly and unironically believe that it is one of the best science fiction books ever written. It's about, alien spiders developing intelligent, sentient sapiens, by which I don't mean alien spider analogs, but actual spiders of the genus Portia, which is a real spider genus that really exists on the real Earth, on a different planet far away from human civilization, evolving sapiens. Though you wouldn't be able to tell that this is a very interesting book about spiders from either the title or the name, because both of them are boring as shit. But it is an absolute masterpiece of world building and storytelling. I highly recommend it. Then we have a question from Lady Paprika. I saw what you did that night back in Hamburg. Where did you hide the body? Are you aware of the role of the body in the coming end of the world, aren't you? No, hang on, that's you are aware of the role of the body in the coming end of the world, aren't you? That's the real wording of it. Look, you're gonna have to be a little bit more specific than that, but it is the body that I think you're referring to. The timeline has changed and your future is outdated. Representatives of the Directorate will meet with you in the patio furniture section of your local Home Depot 48 hours after you've seen this video to rebrief you as an agent lost at sea. In case your handshake protocols are outdated as well, please do bring a hypothetical pencil drawing of a duck. So, favorite role-playing system both at the moment and of all time, asks Matteo Del Gallo, or Del Gallo if he's Italian, I don't know which of the two, or maybe he's Portuguese, is Del Gallo, could also be that. I'm gonna say it. I have to say it. It's City of Mist, baby. I have made a whole video on how I think the power tag system of this game is so genius, it makes so much sense to me, it's so good and perfect, and nothing else even remotely as good has ever been designed by humans or other entities. I've been sort of redeveloping it as more of a setting agnostic thing because I do game design as a hobby on Friday nights. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite things of all time, definitely my favorite play system, not just generally, but also currently. Though I do think that for some kinds of games, especially sandboxy types of games, I'd prefer to use different systems, maybe Genesis, even though, you have the whole dice problem. I have enough Genesis dice, but you need some training to read them properly. And I've been very partial recently to Stars Without Number by Kevin Crawford. The formatting of this book, I tell you, it is gorgeous. Plus, I've always I've really wanted to get into proper sci-fi, even though this is highly versatile. It's about you have this space frontier type shit where you travel the dangerous stars and all that, but there's no reason why the star systems couldn't be archipelagos and you couldn't be pirates. You can adapt that system. It's very flexible, and it actually has different systems of different genres, also developed by Kevin Crawford, that they're fully compatible, even though they're high fantasy systems and shit like that. How great is this? And would you look at the time, there's not that much of the video left, so I'm gonna pick a question by The Posh Barbarian, and it goes, what's the most fucked up conspiracy theory you have ever imagined, and how quickly did you dismiss it for being so inconceivable? That's a very nice bookend for the whole, because it started with a conspiracy question too, although I have to once again say I'm not really keeping up with the conspiracies anymore that much. Although, there was somewhat recently I came up with and a thought occurred to me that really developed into a rather complex theory, and it kind of recontextualized the whole world for me. Like, usually conspiracy theories have like holes in them. This one I haven't been able to poke any holes into, even though poking holes into intellectual constructs is something that I really, really love doing. So this really is, I think, I'm not fully done thinking about it yet, the answer to everything. Okay, so basically,